as I begin officially with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin with Allah's name or with Allah's signature, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. And in speaking of that phrase in Al-Fatiha, Rabbil Alameen, which has generally been translated as Lord of all the worlds, that ayah does not mean Lord of all the physical worlds or Lord of all the physical planets. The word for that would be Al-Awalam, Rabbil Awalam. That means Lord of all of the planetary bodies that you see floating in the universe. Rabbil Alameen means Lord, or the one who has created, the one who has systematized, the one who continues to evolve and sustain not the physical planetary system, but the systems that are born out of the life forms that participate in those planetary systems, meaning El-Alameen refers to those life forms that have sentience or that can think. And those life forms are not only human, those life forms are also animal, those life forms are also insects, those life forms are also reptilian, those life forms are also amoeba. They found out that the amoeba, although it doesn't have a brain as we think about brains, it still has the ability to process information and make decisions for itself, for its own betterment. So this is what is meant by El-Alameen. It means any system of creation that is able to, we use the term think, but what we're really saying is that Allah has created multiple systems of living organisms that are able to make decisions for themselves in or towards the betterment of their own condition. So this is where Imam Muhammad was going in translating that: systems of knowledge, ilm. And when you're reading words in the Quran that end with the elongated keshra sound, meaning the E sound, the elongated E sound, as in Alameen, Muslimin, that elongated E sound when attached to nouns is signifying also that this particular group or this particular idea has the capability of thinking, has the capability of relegating information in the mind in a way that allows it to so-called chew on it. You know, when we say, I can't make a decision right now, but let me chew on it for a little while, get back to me tomorrow. Well, the vowel sound called the kesra means exactly that. It means to masticate with the teeth. It means to bite on it, to chew on it, to turn it around, to allow it to ruminate. Just like the cow does. It takes in food, it chews on that grass, it swallows that grass, and then it regurgitates it in order to chew on it over and over again, enough to make it acclimate properly within its system. So that's what the elongated E sound means in the Arabic vowel system. So when you see words like El-Alameen, it means those systems that Allah has created with enough thinking capacity to be able to intelligize things, to take things into its intellect or into its thinking capacity, whatever that capacity might be, and use that information in order to make proper decisions for itself. Allah says also, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And then it goes on to say that this information is for those who are, they call it God-fearing, but it means those possessors of taqwa. And that's given in that word, muttaqeen. Those who are muttaqeen. But because it has that elongated E sound, muttaqeen, it means not only that these are the possessors of taqwa, but the taqwa within these people is being constantly thought about. It's being constantly regurgitated. They're constantly turning it around to see how they can refine it. See, just like the cow's belly is doing with that food. How can I make it more refined so that it becomes better acclimated in my system? Well, that's what we do with taqwa. Now, if you have taqwa, but you're not giving it that kind of conscious attention, then you are not of al-muttaqeen. You are just a possessor of taqwa sometimes. But the ones who are possessors of taqwa all of the time are the ones who are giving constant attention to taqwa. So I hope that's clear. So I thank you all for joining me. I heard many, many chimes. Inshallah, we'll get a chance to hear a few more of the introductions at the end of my discourse. But you're joining us on Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. This is our special Ramadan-only Cosmic Quran session. And if you were with us yesterday, you'll understand exactly where I'm picking up today. If you were not, you will kindly email me and I will kindly in return send you yesterday's replay, gratis, free of charge. So we spoke yesterday about the so-called Black Madonna and Child. And by the way, this is an image that is protected as we speak in the Vatican, in Italy, in the Vatican, Rome, Italy. And it's a statue. They call her Mother Mary, but the alternative name is the Black Madonna and Child. Many popes have stood before this statue and have bowed down before this statue and have actually kissed the feet of this statue. Now, it's not something that they like to talk about because they don't want to confuse the Catholic world with this black image of Mary and this black image of her child, Jesus, being held in her arms. But they also know that it has a much higher and a much more significant meaning than just an historical set of figures who may have existed about 2,000 years ago or so. So we spoke yesterday about the Black Madonna and Child being symbolic of black matter space, which is also called in science dark matter space. And we spoke about that black matter space as a melanated construct. In other words, science presently says, and I have to qualify that science by saying that this is specifically the science that is coming out of European quarters. Different people around the world have different ways of approaching cosmology. They have different ways of establishing science and promoting science. The Chinese has a way, and these people in Africa, parts of Africa, have another way, and people in India see science from the viewpoint of their own history and investigation into nature. And Europe happened to take on a particular set of lenses when it comes to seeing material reality and then teaching that material reality. So through the eyes of European scholarship, scientific scholarship, they have come to the conclusion that the majority of the universe is 95% unknown. And they call that 95% unknown content of the universe black matter space. And they're recently saying that black matter space is actually melanin constituted. Whatever their idea of melanin is, they're saying that it's not only found in the skins of human beings, it is also the stuff that the majority of the universe is actually constructed of. So keep that in mind as we go along. So this Black Madonna and Child are not speaking to an individual set of mother and child that existed so many years ago on Earth. It's speaking to a much higher idea. When you understand the Black Madonna to be a symbol of the black matter space universe itself, and when you understand the child that she is cradling in her arms to represent the intelligence that is born out of that universal template. So the Black Madonna represents the universe of black matter space, and the child that she produces represents the intelligence that is born out of the universe. The word universe means united verse, or in other words, it means one verse or one statement. Who is that statement from? It is from the Creator. Some call him God. Muslims say Allah. Other religions say other things. But all of those who agree with the idea that the creative force that predates everything that we know of in creation has no birth date, has no death date, that's the power that we're talking about. That one represents one power, and the creation of the universe represents a singular statement, although the universe contains many, many, many different kinds of things. All of those things are still part and parcel of one universal template called Tawheed in Al-Islam. Oneness, interrelated oneness. And this Tawheed interconnects everything in the cosmos, and it shows us the singularity in matter. The prefix uni in universe comes from the Sanskrit word yoni, Y-O-N-I, and yoni is the womb. The womb. Allah says in the Quran that we are to have taqwa for the wombs that bore us. Arham is called in Arabic. Raham, singular. A word connected to rahmah, which means mercy, which is also connected to the attribute of God called Ar-Rahman, the merciful benefactor. So we as human beings are the benefactors of God's mercy that he has actually placed into created matter itself. It is strewn throughout every single particulate in creation, all of the way down to your atoms, your subatomic life, your quarks, whatever else exists in the universe have been created upon the platform of Allah's mercy and also upon the platform of Allah's desire, if you will, to give human beings a scientific platform to work from. So we're not just working from his mercy. Allah says he created everything within the realm of his mercy, his rahmah, and also his ilm, or his knowledge, science. The first thing you're going to come into when you study creation is Allah's mercy. When it rains and we walk out in the rain and we're able to get clean because we're walking out in the rain, if that's how we're living, yeah, well, we're experiencing the mercy of God. That's the initial mercy. But the second part that brings up the rear behind that mercy is that when we do that thing over and over again and we begin to investigate exactly what rain is, what is the microscopic makeup of rain? See, when we get to that particular point in scientific investigation, then the mercy begins to replicate and becomes exponential. We then realize that there are multiple mercies to come out of just that one raindrop in terms of what rain contains and is able to do for life forms on this earth. So it's mercy, and it is also knowledge or science that is being established. The word Madonna that we're discussing, it means what the word Medina means. You see how closely related those sounds are in those two words? The word Madonna, as in Madonna and child, and the word Medina, who has a child also. It's called the Muslim. We are the intelligent quotient that is the product of Medina. the fitra-based system for our social evolution. Medina. Madonna is the universal environment that we call cosmos. She is the universal environment which produces out of her yoni-verse the proper growth and development of the cosmic life. All things in the cosmos are produced out of the Madonna, the universal system of black matter space. Medina is the environment here on earth for the proper growth and development of our social life. So Madonna gives us the proper growth and development for the cosmic life, the social life of the cosmos, the planetary getting together and intermingling of the planetary bodies. Whereas Medina, I repeat, is the environment for the proper growth and development of the human being's social life and interaction. As human beings, we have inherited that intelligence. Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad once said that the human being is matter intelligized. The human being, I repeat, is matter that has become intelligized. We are simply matter which God has blown the essence of life into, and that essence is called ruh. In the Hebrew language, in the Torah, that same concept is called ruach. Ruach. Allah smoothed it out a bit in the Quran by referring to that same power source, that same generator, as ruh. And ruh, according to its consonantal connections, based on the consonants of ra and the heavy ha sound, ruh, that word means the movement and evolution of breath. The letter ra signifies movement, fast movement, a movement which creates an evolutionary pattern. For instance, the fast movement of an airplane when it's taking off at the tarmac, or taking off from the tarmac, the faster it goes is going to necessitate that it not continue to go horizontally, but that it begins to rise. So as it is moving forward, it is also taking on an evolutionary rise into the sky. That's Ra. That's why the ancient Egyptians called their sun god Ra. And Ra was symbolized by the sun in the sky, which begins at dawn in our estimation, creating a glow even before we're able to see the actual body. And then we see the tip of the sun coming up at dawn, and before you know it, it's hard to keep your eye on it, but if you're on the highway and the sun is coming up, you know how fast that sun can rise above the level that you just got finished viewing it at, right? That before you know it, that whole body is shown, and it's rising and it's rising, and it's doing it relatively quickly, right? That's Ra. But it is showing you an evolutionary sun, because the more it rises, the more profound its light, and the more sustained and elevated even becomes its heat. So Ra represents movement, fast movement, and also an evolutionary movement. Whereas the heavy letter Ha in Arabic means breath. It means the kind of breath that you take when you have practically exhausted yourself. There are two H's in the Arabic letter system. The one represents your normal breathing. You find that H at the end of the word Allah, where you barely hear it. Allah. The word Hassan, a lot of the Arabic words carry that light Ha. But then you have words that carry the heavy Ha, like Hayya ala salah and Hayya ala falah. See, falah, salah. Those are heavy H's, which means that quite a bit of energy has gone into this particular system, whatever it's discussing. So the ruh is not normal breathing. The ruh is breathing that puts you in a sort of emergency type of positioning. That means there's something serious happening there. That means that you need to pay attention because you might have to make a quick move that could even possibly save your life. Hayya, rush to the salah, rush to the falah. You know, you only got a certain amount of time to harvest. That's what falah means. It means the successful harvesting of the crop. You know, you take your time if you want and let that sun continue to beat down on those melons and the vegetation. You go out there and be boinked. Be like that guy that thought he had all of the time in the world to harvest and do his thing, and he's out there just talking and smoking cigarettes and all of that, and his neighbors telling him, man, you better go out there and harvest. Nah, don't worry about that. And he said, I'll wait till tomorrow. He gets up tomorrow, he goes out there, and it's all been boinked to a crisp. Because he said, don't worry about it. And he refused to say, inshallah, it's going to be out there tomorrow when I get up. Huh? Yeah. He thought he had powers of disposal over that creation. No. So that's what we mean when we discuss these letters. They all have significance in terms of understanding the deeper and more profound meanings of Quranic words. Quranic Arabic words. So again, ruh means the movement and evolution of breath. So you need to study what breath does, especially when it's been exacerbated, when it's been put in a situation where it has to go into overtime. Because that overtime breath, that heavy breathing that you do at the end of the race, or after you finish exercising, or after you finish being chased by something that you're trying to get away from, that heavy breath is a temporary measure that your heart and your lungs employ for purposes of bringing your life back to normalcy, back to the smaller H, the less heavy H, the normal breathing. Breath is ether, A-E-T-H-E-R, and all of the four major elements are born out of ether. You need to make that an independent study of yours. Just study that word in all of its manifestations. So breath is the byproduct of ether. And ether is that substance that existed prior to the formation of what we're calling now the four basic elements of water, air, fire, and land, or earth. The four elements, I repeat, are born out of the original breath, ether. Some might call it God's breath. And if you understand the connection, you can get away with that description. So if you are not exhibiting intelligence, then you are not really living, scripturally speaking. Intelligence is the byproduct of what the universe itself is giving birth to. In the same way that that universal symbol we spoke about as the Black Madonna is carrying her product called her child. That child, I repeat, is the intelligence that is born out of the study of universal phenomenon. So again, if the universe has produced you and me, and we are not exhibiting intelligence, we're not living an intelligent life, we're not chasing down intelligent methods for operating the life, then we are not really living. See, if you don't have breath, you're not living. If you don't have the breath that I'm speaking about now, that scripture is highlighting as breath, then you're not living scripturally speaking. You can be living physically speaking, but you're not living the human life as Allah ordained it on the spiritual and scriptural level. The Quran's word for death is mate, transliterated M-A-Y-T, mate. And mate means to be muted. You see that? Mate, mute. Mute means that you could still be alive. Your television can still be alive, but we can't hear it. It's on pause and we can't hear it. It's muted. There's a temporary ceasing of its operation. That's what scripture means by death. It doesn't mean to be physically dead. Physical death and the physical life mean absolutely nothing in this universe. It means nothing. Life forms come and life forms go. So when God reveals scripture throughout history, he's not addressing the human being as a biological life form. He is addressing the human being as a functionality life form. He's not addressing your form. He's addressing your function, because it's your function that is able to have impact in the world, not your form. Bodies come, bodies go. But if you're one of those bodies that has taken on a functional disposition that is able to influence and advance other life forms in the universe along with you, you're able to do things that improve upon human worth and value. You're able to do things that even elevate the life of animals. Yeah, that's what science does in the hands of true human thinkers. If you're able to do that, then that is the life that is being addressed in Scripture, Bible, Quran, and any scriptures that came prior to that. So mate represents the ceasing of that level of life in the world. And if you listen to the English words mute and compare it with that Arabic word mate, you're hearing the same exact consonants. If you listen to the English word moot, as in being a moot point, M-O-O-T, it is also consonantally connected to mate and also to the English word mate, M-A-T-E. The reason that your mate becomes a mate is because we are able to mute out the possibility of anyone else getting with us as a marriage partner. As soon as you decide, I'm going to marry this one, well, all of those other ones who have been standing in line or who might possibly come to your attention in the future, they are automatically muted out of the possibilities. They become mate or muted or a moot point in terms of you getting with them in a marriage situation. So they become dead to that possibility. See, they're not dead literally. It has nothing to do with literal dying. It has to do with the dying of that particular function. Now, these present day weird scientists that we were discussing yesterday, who are operating from what I call the Yaqub energy. Yaqub energy, not Yaqub as an actual literal historical figure who created the so-called white man 6,600 years ago on the island of Patmos or Pelan. We're not talking about that mythology. We're talking about what that mythology was symbolic of. Well, how come those of us who were in the old nation of Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he never told us that it was some Yaqub energy. He told us it was Yaqub. Well, your mama told you that there was a Santa Claus. Whatever Santa Claus represents symbolically, your little 5-year-old mind couldn't wrap its brain around that. So you had to live with the literal idea until you were able to grow into a more figurative or symbolic idea. And Elijah Muhammad told you, along with all of those stories, that you were a baby nation. And that he wasn't even here to teach you religion so much. He was here to save the baby from the fire. If you're just joining us, star 6 your phone so that you'll be muted and we'll have a perfectly clear call. All right. Somebody's not getting the memo. Oh, I think they did, actually. Okay. Thought I was going to have to do it. But just to be sure, let me do my general mute.
All participants are muted.
Okay, this is just for the purposes of a clear call. I will open up the phones at the end of my discourse, so stand by and enjoy the ride. So once again, these present-day weird scientists, they find themselves incapable of using melanin as we've been discussing it, not as a black superiority item of discussion. I don't get into that. I don't believe God created anything in the universe to give superiority to one so-called race over another. I don't believe that. You say, well, we the original man. We got to be superior. Well, that's like saying that the original level of human growth called the infant is superior to the adult. You see, you're putting yourself in a trick bag when you come with that kind of screwed up logic. If it was first, it means it's better. That's not true in nature. A lot of things that were here. Prehistoric man was here before you. Does that make him better? You see, you can't use that logic. It doesn't add up scientifically. Science uses things, you have the same thing, same experiment, and if it adds up to the same thing over and over, okay, that's science. But if you're picking and choosing where to apply it, that's not science. So just listen and relax. Original does not necessarily mean superior. And every life form in creation has its share, its dosage of melanin. From the whitest of the white to the blackest of the black. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad sealed the deal when he said that we all, speaking of every human being on earth, we all get our color from the sun. Isn't that beautiful? The man was awake, and he was simply buying time in hopes of being able to administer properly over the growth and development of the people who he had been given charge of, called the black people. So present-day scientists who are operating based on a European paradigm, which is a paradigm that leans very heavily in the favor of tracing everything back to a material beginning and not knowing enough in their scientific infancy to study and appreciate the metaphysical origins of things or contributions to things in science. Imam Muhammad encouraged us to begin studying metaphysics, not just physics. Keep that in mind. So these scientists found themselves incapable of using melanin as a successful interface between themselves and whatever they believe the essence of the universe to be. So they have been having melanin conferences for at least the last 2 decades in various cities in Europe, in the UK, etc. However, they have disinvited or not invited members of the human family from anywhere outside of Europe, continental Europe, and specific groups and organizations of scientists here in America. But they could not be of non-European stock. So there was something that they felt they needed to discuss that was in-house, that only the European minds and those who were concerned about the European future should have access to as information. They were in a quagmire and still are in a quagmire as to how best use this pretty much newfound information pertaining to the universe being 95% melanin. So one of the last stages in what has come to be a scheme in science is to attempt siphoning off and studying the melanocytes of darker pigmented peoples of the planet. And they are doing so in hopes of intermingling or intertwining what they are finding in many of the darker peoples of the planet Earth as evolved DNA. This is their language. Evolved DNA. They're finding this evolved DNA in some of the poorest peoples on planet Earth, particularly in parts of Africa, in Haiti, and they have also found significant numbers of people in America who are of the darker peoples of the planet Earth here in this part of the world. And that DNA that we're discussing has been found with up to 12 strands. And these European scientists are trying to determine scientifically how to interweave that 12-strand DNA into their between 2 and 6 strand DNA in hopes of allowing their limited number of DNA to impact and increase the potency of what it is they're carrying around genetically. They are preoccupied to a fault with DNA, is the point. Up to this point, they're finding that their particular racial stock, if you will, have a DNA that has remained relatively unevolved. Unevolved. Now, we spoke yesterday about the artificial replacement for DNA called XNA. And the X stands for xeno, spelled X-E-N-O. And xeno means alien, strange, odd, different. These scientists have been sold the idea that their genetic structure is somehow antithetical to the fitra. There's something going on in that genetic strand that some of them are surmising is antithetical. So they are inventing an artificial construct that they can insert into the DNA pool, the DNA fabric, that will replace the DNA that they feel is not growing with its proper evolution, in its proper evolution, and they're going to create a better gene, a better DNA, by replacing the DNA itself with what they call XNA, which is admittedly an artificial construct. So they're replacing a currently fitra-based building block with an artificial building block is the point. I hope y'all are listening very, very attentively. The Europeans' cognition and evolution has been stagnated due to his soul's leanings towards arrogance and jealousy. Let me repeat that. The European's cognition, meaning his level of consciousness in the world, as well as his evolution, has been curtailed, it has been stagnated, it has been stuck on stupid, if you will, because of his own devices. And the reason why he is finding himself stagnated and now in need of all of these artificial props to try to play catch up in the world of genetic findings and all of that. The reason why he sees a need to hurriedly play catch up and get ahead is because of a self-imposed limitation that begins with him being rooted in his initial foray into the world, onto the world scene, when he began journeying around the world as an explorer, your Christopher Columbuses and those type. When he came out the gate like that, or literally came out of the hills and caves of Europe like that, and he began to see what the rest of the world had been gifted with by the Creator in terms of the wealth that was beneath the soil, wealth that was in the sea, wealth that was in the caves, and the diamonds and the gold and all of these other things that had actually given a boost, an economic boost to people around this planet, while he was cooped up in the caves and the hillsides, etc., of Europe, especially Western Europe. When he came out of the gate like that, and he first went into Africa, or he first went into India with the spices, and he first went and he saw all of these things that did not occur, that were not happening in Europe, he came into an overly aggressive form of arrogance and jealousy. And that can happen to any people on this planet. It has happened to many, many people on this planet. It's the challenge that most people come into when they begin to recognize that somebody else has something that they want. Allah put it in the Quran that He has created humanity as tribes and nations, or nations and tribes, so that they might become curious about each other. And one writer adds, and not despise each other. That they might become curious about each other, that they might want to know more about each other. So Allah put a natural tendency in human beings everywhere you find them to want to explore and to want to know, based on their curiosity concerning why they have this and I don't, or why I have this and maybe I can share this with them, or barter this with them, because I want what I don't have and they might want what they never had. And that's how economics, trade, bartering and bargaining, that's how all of that gets its fitra-based beginnings. So Allah is not the one who put the proclivity in the human to become jealous because of what they did not have. Allah put that nature in us to be curious about the things we didn't have, so that we would develop social systems. And along those lines also develop into a maturing of our civilized tendencies. See, that's the evolutionary process that Allah put in humanity, to become more and more civilized in our approach to other people and what they got, and the sharing of things with people who don't have, the sharing of the things we have with the have-nots. That's a natural tendency. How do you know it's natural? Because tribes do it. So how come humanity can't do it? Are tribes knocking each other in the head and taking each other's stuff? Well, maybe in the hood. Gangs are, yeah. But see, that's a difference. That's that artificial construct that I'm talking about, that sneaks in arrogance and jealousy over what people have. Bloods want the territory the Crips have. The Crips want the territory that the other. See, it's out of arrogance, we're better than you, and also jealousy. Now, trace those two traits back to the Quran, and both of them exist within the framework of Iblis's mentality and disposition. And Iblis is not put in the Quran as a white man. Iblis is not put in the Quran as a black man, a brown man, a yellow man, a red man, and all of that made up stuff. He's not put in the Quran as that. He's put in the Quran as a disposition, as a particular mentality that highlights arrogance. I am better than him. And Khayrun minhu. I am greater, I'm more significant than him. So said Iblis. And also of jealousy. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay in the cut and I'm going to surround them. I'm going to come at them from before them, from behind them, from their right, from their left. And by the time, right, that's Iblis. And he's doing it because he wanted to be king. And Allah said, I'm going to have somebody to come and be the leader in the world now. He's called the Khalifa, and when I create him, I want all of you to make sajda in his direction. Iblis said, not me, I can't do that. You made me from fire, you created me from fire, you're creating him from stinky stuff. What? You touch him, you leave an imprint, an impression. See, I'm fire. I can't be impressed. You touch me, you're going to draw back a nub, a point finger. And I'm not that dude, God. Now, Allah said, nevertheless, when I have breathed into him, nafakhtu, of my ruh, then fall down. I'm not asking you to give him obeisance prior to my ruh being installed in him. But after I've done that, you're going to realize who the superior creation actually is. And if you had not been arrogant and if you had not gotten jealous, you could have gone from being the governor over these angels to being the vice president. You won't be the president, but you would have experienced a raise. But you're so quick to judge, Iblis, because of your temperament and your short-sightedness. You could have been vice president while the Khalifa ruled as president, and it would have been greater than your self-imposed position of governor. You get it? All right? So because the Europeans found themselves in a situation of being land poor, resource poor, and people poor, dying from diseases, multiple diseases that could have been easily curtailed or even cured, had they had the knowledge and had they had the sanitation systems to be able to handle those kinds of medical and health issues, etc. They didn't have it. So unfortunately, millions of people on that continent fell a victim to things that they could have overcome. So they have always seen themselves in a sort of private window when it comes to how they should manage their lives in the world. And when coming into a more worldwide view of other people, once journeying out from Europe and meeting other people, they unfortunately brought that arrogance and that jealousy with them. And the arrogance and the jealousy, in case you missed my point, is the main reason why they are not in a position to experience the same kind of evolutionary jump in the DNA as other people who do not carry that mental, moral, and spiritual disposition. So their scientists have been conducting an undercover operation of genetic cat and mouse games that they have been playing for many years with the darker nations of the world ever since. So when you hear about a natural disaster taking place in Haiti or in any of the other parts of the darker nations of the world's lands, and you see the Europeans and their Red Cross and Israel and their red, what is that? I don't know. I don't know what they call theirs. But you understand what I'm saying. When they're the first ones on the scene, supposedly to give assistance to people who have gone through a disaster, like in Louisiana a few years back and other parts of the United States that have experienced many, many deaths and sicknesses, especially in areas where so-called black people reside, and there's a mad rush to get in there. There's also a mad rush of mad scientists who are there to collect body parts, to siphon off blood, especially. The blood bank people are the first ones there. If you think vampirism is not real, you're not really reading history correctly. A mad dash to get as much. Why do they need all of this blood during the COVID crisis? Nobody's losing blood. They're losing air. What's this mad dash now on the part of the Red Cross to collect all of this blood all over the world? For what? Because they are searching that blood for these markers that we've been discussing, these DNA markers, these DNA 12-strand, 8-strand possibilities in the DNA. And they're trying still to determine ways of inculcating that level of potency into the European strand. It's a very, very deep cycle of psychosis. Scientists have been synthesizing these XNA molecules for well over a decade. These artificial molecules are also capable of both evolution and replication. Let me repeat those two words. They're going to be some of the most important words that we discuss today. Evolution or evolution, whichever way you'd like to pronounce it, and replication. I repeat, these artificial XNA molecules are also capable of doing what your DNA, RNA genes do. They're capable of evolution and replication, repeating their sequences over and over and over again. They all insert themselves into your genetics as the replacement Rabb in your system. See, you think Rabb is an attribute of Allah. Rabb is never presented as one of the attributes of Allah. There's no definite article before this word in the Quran. We never say Rabb, El Rabb. It's always just Rabb, because Rabb is separate and distinct from what Allah does in his attributes. Rabb is actually an energy source that Allah actually, and I'm careful about using this word, but he actually shares this power with evolutionary constructs. So there's an evolutionary movement taking place in all living things, in terms of their behavior, in terms of even their consciousness. Living things are much more conscious now than they have ever been in the history of our studying living things. Creatures on the earth right now, there are many of them that are getting along that are traditionally known for being absolute mortal enemies to each other. Animals are saving the lives of animals outside of their group. I saw a cat allowing a duckling to suckle from her nipples along with her kittens. She found a duckling who had lost its mother. She let that duckling right up under her body, and that duckling, I don't know what that's like, a little beak up under there. But nevertheless, she performed the same motherly duties, and that's something that's not that popular. You understand? So follow what I'm saying. Follow the logic to its logical conclusion. Rabb is a special energy that Allah utilizes. His utilization of it is a unique utilization, but there's a lower grade of this Rabb principle that Allah employs and allows us to tap into. Let's talk about that. First, let's talk about the word Rabb as a combination of the two consonants Ra and Ba, which I call Bait. Ra and Bait. R and B for you musical aficionados. R and B. Ra, we spoke about that already. It means evolutionary movement. Ra. Even the pronunciation of this letter in the mouth, you can feel both the evolution because your tongue has to be raised up towards your top palate. That's evolution. And you can feel the movement because there's supposed to be a trill. When the tongue repetitively hits the top palate in the way that the Spanish people pronounced ra, ra, ra. You see that? It's electric. Ra, ra, ra. So the very pronunciation of the letter gives you its fitra-based meanings. That's what Nunetics is. We do that for every single letter in the Arabic alphabet. Trace it back to its fitra-based form, and when you're pronouncing it, it creates a particular picture of itself in your psychic makeup. So Ra is evolutionary movement, and Bait or Ba represents that which fills, empties, and then refills, and does that perpetually. It fills, it empties, and then it refills, and it does that time and time and time again. That's how Bait came to mean house in the Arabic lexicon, because a house fills up with family members. Those family members grow up, they get married, some of them might die, some move out, and then new family members come in, grandchildren come into that house, right? Or maybe a whole nother family. Maybe you'll move out and a whole nother family will move into that house and then move out in time and so forth and so on. And eventually the house will empty again. It'll fill up with new members. It'll empty out again, fill out with new members. That's why it's called a bait. Because a bait means a temporary deposit. It's a temporary deposit of things or people or even of ideas. You see the house called the Bait in Mecca, where the Kaaba is. They call that Baytul Atiq, the ancient house. But do you go there? Do you see people making Hajj every day? No, they go there during a particular season, and that place fills up. Around the house, it fills up, and then you go home. And you might come back for Umrah, and then you go home. See? So, Bait, I repeat, is any place which fills up, empties out, and then refills, and does that perpetually. Now, where is that as a part of your body? It's in two places. You'll find this in my book called Nunetics, the fitra-based meanings of Arabic letters. The first place is your belly. Even in English, it starts with ba, b, belly. In Arabic, it's called the butun. It also starts with ba, right? With the bait letter. So what does it do? You feed the belly, it fills up, it empties, becomes nutrition in the body. Some of it is discarded as waste. It's recycled. You fast overnight, you break that fast, called break fast or breakfast in the morning, and you put more food in there. And it empties up again. Oh, my belly's so full. You're rubbing that belly, right? And then it empties. And you do that perpetually until you die. Now, that's the first part of the body that does that. There's a secondary part of the body that does exactly the same thing, and it's only in the male biology, and that's the testicles. The testicles fill up with spermatozoa once they become produced in teenagers, etc., puberty. And that sperm is then able to be released or emptied from those two sacs, those two testicle sacs, and then nature provides a way of refilling those sacs with new spermatozoa. And that new spermatozoa is eventually emptied out through whatever measure, right? Intercourse or whatever, Little brothers got different ways of emptying, right? And then it fills up again, etc., etc. So the belly and the other word that begins with B that I won't pronounce, but you know what it is, rhymes with smalls, that they perform that fitra-based function. So Ra and Bait are the the letters that represent Rab, with an emphasis on the perpetuality of the Bait. There are two B's in Rab, right? Just means that whatever's going on in the Bait is a very strongly reinforced activity. All right? So Imam Muhammad, in a lecture entitled Rab of All the Worlds, that he gave, I believe, back in either the early 90s or late 80s, he said that the attribute of Rab, he didn't call it attribute necessarily, I'm saying that just for your reference, the attribute of Rab is operating within each and every one of us, and it is deciding our destiny in spite of our conscious determination to plan our own course. He gave as an example his own life, where he said he wanted to be a welder. He loved welding, and he loved doing some other things as work, right? And he was on his way to becoming a professional welder, and he said the Rab stepped in. The Rab was activated in him and said, no, you're not going to be Wallace D. Muhammad the welder. You're going to be Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. See, took his life right over. So he consciously planned on one thing, but there's an activity, there's an energy in you that actually supersedes what your intellect has been deciding for you, because that activity, that cosmic intelligence that visits you on that level, knows better than you what you should be and what your contribution to the universe should be. Now, the fact that this Xeno gene, or this what I call the X factor gene, the fact that it is antithetical to the fitra, that it works in opposition to the fitra, that also implies that the evolution and replication we've been discussing will always or also have to be just as strange as the Xeno indicates. Xeno means strange, it means odd. So if it means odd, and they know it means odd, and they're sticking that thing into your system, then it has to react in you in a very odd way. So we're now talking about the generational passing down of genetically coded information from parent to offspring. That's how genetics are passed down from parent to offspring. So this evolution, quote unquote, and this replication is taking place on the level of something that is creating an odd disposition in your genes. Those who accept this particular morphology of the genes. And it stands to reason that down the road, there's going to be multiple complications related to this weird science. This is what the Quran calls writing the kitab with their own hands and saying that it is from God. See, we spoke yesterday about this word kitab, and I told you it doesn't mean book like book. Pages, words, typed, or whatever. That's not what kitab is. Kitab represents genetically coded information that Allah used in the construction of your genetic fabric. Your genes are coded with information that is called intelligence. That means the internal telling or communicating that's coming from the gens or the genes. Nobody had to teach you intelligence. Allah clocked it into your DNA, RNA fabric as coded information. That's the writing that Kitab is speaking to. And when they introduce something false into that genetically coded information, such as they're doing with the XNA, when they introduce something that they fabricate into that, that's writing the Kitab with their own hands and saying this is from God. Now, what do they mean by that? It means that they are presenting it as though it is a product of the natural states of evolution's progress. God, see, he gave us DNA. Okay, thank the Lord. But it's time for man to take over now. God, you rest. You rested on the seventh day in the Bible. And your rest means our stepped up activity, because we understand your limitations, God. Your limitations are in everything you did that was necessary to bring about a fully fledged material world. Now that the fully fledged material world is here, and the fire, the water, the air, and all that, and all the elements, and all in the movements, and the weeks, and the months, and the years, and the sunrise, and the moon waxing and waning, you did a great job, God. But now it's time for you to take your rest. It's the seventh day. This is your day, God. Just relax, max and relax. Sit back and enjoy the ride. We got it from here. That's what those mad scientists, that's how they think. And believe it or not, Imam Muhammad spoke about a session he was attending where some Jewish rabbis were present, and they actually told him that that's their role, that God rested on the seventh day in their book, and their job as Jewish scholars was to take over the charge, the responsibility of advancing creation further than God could, because he was limited to the creation of material things. Isn't that something? Now, this is not the first time that this switcheroo from fitra to falsehood has been pulled. If you're reading your scriptures correctly and the ancillary materials that come along with those scriptures, you're going to understand that this has happened prior in history, actually before the birth of Christ's mission. Jesus the Christ, before his mission among the ancient Jews. When he was just a little old 12-year-old Jesus in the temple among the rabbis who were assigned to teach him, they were his teachers. He went to the synagogue. He was brought there by his mama, by Mary, and left there to be tutored by the rabbis. 12 years old. And he confronted the rabbis. Now, I want you to pay special attention to the word for their Jewish teachers. It's called rabbis. Rabbis. Rabbah. You see rabbah in the word rabbis? Rabbi, R-A-B-B-I. They position themselves in this switcheroo that I'm discussing as the ones to take over where the original Rabb left off. So they became Rabb artificially. In their minds, successfully. In our understanding, they tried to step into the position of the creator of all, and the all-knowing and the all-powerful, and etc. They tried to step into that position, and they chose that name for their mission. Rabb. We are the Rabb now. We are the rabbis, the rabbis. So 12-year-old Jesus confronted these rabbis in the temple, and they were supposed to be his teachers. Rabbi simply means one who nurtures the intellect. So it doesn't mean teacher, but it doesn't mean what Rabbah means in the Quran. They will never be that. None of us will ever be that. So they saw themselves as being this sort of replacement God for God, whose job was to take over where God left off prior to his rest on the seventh day of creation. And just so you'll know, God's rest was the same as Jesus's arrest. Jesus was arrested while in the Garden of Gethsemane. It means the same thing. They're just giving it to you in a different scenario. God's rest on the seventh day put God to sleep, if you will. And Jesus' arrest put him on the cross and rendered him inactive, in the same way that many of these rabbis see God as being arrested and curtailed. The ones who understand the wisdom higher than that selfish implication would suggest, they understand that it's not rest as though God is tired. It is any point in history that becomes so inundated by artificial everything that the creation itself, the material creation, will bring about a rest to that scheme. And rest is a code word for reset. R-E-S-T is actually R-E-S-E-T. That's why they're calling this COVID-19 crisis a global reset. This is God resetting or resting or being arrested. They have to arrest material creation. They have to arrest the air that you're breathing so that they can bring in a new scheme, because they believe themselves to be the ones regulating affairs due to the limitations of the Creator God. That's why there's a need for Al-Quran, because previous scriptures have become so confused that everything now has to be rewired and reset to their fitrah-based capacity. That includes the religion that many of you are calling Islam, that the Quran calls Al-Islam. Al-Islam left the planet better than 1,000 years ago and was replaced by the artificially inseminated set of information or so-called knowledge called Islam. There was a bait and switch that took place around about 1,000 years ago or so, when many of the Arabs coming out of the original scenario that produced the purity of the Quranic message, when that message left the Arabian Peninsula and began going into places like ancient Persia and conquering the existing authorities in ancient Persia. These were movements that brought about several what they call empires. The Abbasid Empire, the Umayyad before them Empire. And it was through these empires that they began concocting crafty ways of not only introducing Islam to the world, and I'm talking about now a fabricated version of Quranic knowledge that they called Islam. But along with the spread of what they were believing was da'wah, there was an undercurrent desire on the part of many of them to wrestle away the material goods, the wealth of nations that they would desire to conquer. Muhammad the Prophet never left any instructions. There are no instructions in the Quran to go conquer in the name of Allah. In fact, it's the exact opposite, where Allah speaks against the idea of creating empires, empire building. That's not what the Quran was revealed in order to do. That became the modus operandi of greedy, materialistic driven people. Many who were still in Arabia, who left there to go into ancient Persia, conquer the Persians, take over Zoroastrianism, and in the process inculcate many of the ideals and ideas that were inherent in Zoroastrian religion, and bring those ideas into this newly fabricated idea that we now know as Islam. And Zoroastrianism was heavily into fire worship. So the preoccupation that you see many Muslims having today with the fire, you know, people telling their 8-year-old child, if you don't do this, you're going to burn in hell. If you don't clean your room, you're going to burn in hell. And if the majority of women are seen in hellfire, and the prophet said that, and he didn't say any of that BS. If he said it, there would have been a connection to that logic left in the Quran. So if you're reading these hadiths, and you're seeing clear connections between what the hadith is saying and what the Quran has said, all right, and then that's a safe part of the pool for you to swim in. If that's your desire, to swim in that level of information. Not necessary. You got a bathtub at home. All you need to be is clean. You don't really need to swim with a whole bunch of other people competing with their germs and their stuff. That's what hadiths are. You're competing with the germs left in other ideologies, philosophies, psychologies that have just been reset and put into Islamic jargon. I know I'm hitting you hard today, but it's time for a reset. All you need is Al-Quran. Period. But we need Muhammad's example. It's in the Quran. If you think something is left out, you're not reading the Quran correctly, because it tells you that it's all inclusive. It's fully detailed. Fully detailed. Not one major important issue is left out of the Quran according to the Quran. Let's continue. So we're dealing in our modern day, as we speak, in real time, with a reset or a resting period or an arrest period. Because this scenario that you're reading about in the Bible related to Jesus's crucifixion is being reenacted by the social schemers. It's being and every now and then they reenact the same crucifixion, but they do it in satire. That's why it's called a crisis. The word crisis comes from the word Christ, out of the Greek language. So the COVID-19 crisis is related to a type of crucifixion. The word crucify and Christ and cross, all of them are from the same root. So you're experiencing in real time, in modern day, you're experiencing the crucifixion of Christ. What am I saying? I'm saying that a secretive cabal of what amounts now to much more than just Jewish people. When I say Jews, I'm not talking necessarily about people who are following Judaism or following the Torah per se. I'm talking about people who have instituted for themselves a secret level of information that their rabbis have authored. One of those packages of information is known as the Talmud. There are two versions of it. They're following mostly the version called the Babylonian Talmud, which gives them insight into how to effectuate these schemes as they were effectuated back in the days of ancient Babylon, called Babylon. The people who like to babble on and on and on because they think they know it all. They're the replacement God. So there's been a secretive cabal, and today it's actually composed of ethnicities, if you will, from all around the world, from the blackest of Africa to the whitest of Europe, Asia included. The super wealthy is who I'm talking about now. So they're not Jews ethnically necessarily, and absolutely not religiously. If you're talking about people who are following God's scripture, that's not what they do. They take bits and pieces of it. As the Quran says, they tear the scripture into shreds. You have to understand what this is referring to when you read it in the Quran. They take only that which is going to further support their efforts to keep this scheme going over the heads of ignorant and uninformed people. And they have been conspiring and are conspiring to remain in control of world markets. This is about commerce. They've been conspiring to remain in control of world markets through the institution of specially crafted language that's based on an understanding of their letter system. The Phoenicians participated in putting this together. They were also called the Canaanites. When you read about Cain and Abel in the Bible, you're reading about this conspiracy of the Canaanite to subdue the able, or the ability that would eventually have led to human expression of excellence in this world. They hit that excellence in the head and left their brother for dead. This is a world conspiracy that you're witnessing as we speak. So they locked the understanding of it into various letter systems. One of the primary early systems is the ancient Egyptian language system, called the Kemetic letter system, that was left on the walls in the palaces and the pyramids of ancient Egypt. And the Jews developed a Proto-Hebrew or Hebraic letter system that was comprised of the symbols that were left on the walls of ancient Egypt. The Jews studied that system thoroughly, and that's how they came upon the Hebrew letter system, which is now called the fire letter system. Remember the one in the Quran who said, "You created me from fire"? It's speaking to that. The Jewish letters, as we presently view them, are flames. Look at them carefully. They represent flame structures. Prior to that, the proto, or the original Hebrew system, had nothing to do with looking like anybody's fire. So the Phoenicians took that system, took those letters, and developed multiple language systems, which eventually ended up in the putting together of even the English system. They integrated this method into the Greek letter system, and out of the Greek letter system and the Hebrew letter system, we have what's now called the English letter system, the whole Germanic system of languages that went into Europe and established words upon whose letters were the basis of how you were to understand what was being said behind the curtain or beneath the surface. They didn't teach that beneath the surface meaning to the masses of people. They kept that for their small cabal, and they only fed the masses root letter systems for understanding words that they gave you the definition to. That's why it's called a definition, because definition is from the Phoenicians. That's also where the word phony comes from. That should tell you something. You have phonetics in your language? Fun with phonics, you say, and you teach that to your children? Well, phonics is from the word phony, which is from the word Phoenician. And the word Phoenician is not the original name. They were the ancient Canaanites, and the Greeks called them Phoenicians because the word Phoenician is connected to the color purple. And what is purple? The color of rulership. Purple means royalty in their language. Let's continue. So their Proto-Hebrew letter system was based on an archetypal set of meanings, meaning that their letters were archetypes of things, of ideas. And they did that for each one of the letters. Allah has blessed this man you're listening to, Instructor Benjamin Bilal, with the update and the upgrade on that same system, except that I don't base my letters on things that they invented. I base my letters on things that Allah has created. So every one of the Arabic letters in my Nunetics letter system is based on something that is observable in the fitrah of Allah, and therefore it remains, oh my goodness, independent, if we dare use that word, of practically everything that has been established by scholars when it comes to learning language. This system is able to assist our scholars in tracing their knowledge and the meanings in their root words. This system of Nunetics is geared specifically to trace those meanings back, not to Al-Ghazali, not to Farabi, Arabi, or any of the scholars, not to any of them, not to Ibn Sina, not to any of these great linguists that we have in our history. They're wonderful, but Nunetics will outdo their contributions to language in no time, because Nunetics, I repeat, is giving you connections to Allah's fitrah. So if I give you the letter Aleph, I'm going to trace it to your spine. If I give you the letter Bait, I'm going to trace it to your belly or your testicles. If I give you the letter Ta, I'm going to trace it to your hair when properly kempt. If I give you the letter Tha, I'm going to trace it to your hair when unkempt. And it's going to go on, and I'm going to give you a body part connection for every letter from Aleph to Ya, with Ya representing the outstretched hand as it gives. You don't want that kind of learning? Something wrong with you. This is your inheritance. Especially those who were under Imam W.D. Muhammad's language and logic. Let's continue. So when Jesus was 12 years old, and he was in the temple with the rabbis, he peeped their hole card by asking them to teach him the Hebrew letters. And when they began to say, this is Aleph, this is Beth, this is Gimel, this is, and they began to go through the Hebrew letter system, Jesus said, hold up a second, Chief. Let me ask you a question here. I'm 12 and I got other things to do, and I really don't want you to waste my time, and I don't want to waste your time. I'm not asking you to teach me what I already know. I know these letters. What I'm asking you to teach me, to see if you know it, I'm asking you to teach me the origins of the letters. Teach me the origins of the letters. And they couldn't do it. Therefore, Jesus in an instant became their master. That's when they started calling him master, because he had mastered the origins of the letters. My goodness. Here I am, Instructor Benjamin Bilal. I have mastered an understanding of the origins of the Arabiya, that language. So the ones who are coming trying to teach me, and those who are under this understanding, they're trying to teach us the Quran, they can't do it now. That's justice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can't do it, as innocent as they might be or as schemeful as they might be. We're in a position now to teach them, and we're just learning to memorize the alphabets ourselves. But that's called divine justice. Not against the Arabs, wonderful people, not against them, but against this whole system that has uprooted a people and resituated that people for free labor And the first thing they did was take our tongues out of our mouths figuratively and sometimes literally so that we could not communicate with each other. And in that regard, we could not rebel. And here we are now, the only people in the world with one language, primarily. Black folks, just one. You got poor nations in this world and their children know about 6 and 7 different languages easily. Here we are, English, and that's just about it, unless we learned a little Spanish in school or something, or Puerto Rican friends like I had or whatever. Fortunately, I was born into the Jewish religion and got a chance at an early age to be exposed to Hebrew. And when I realized that Arabic was the sister language to Hebrew, that is what really, really got me going. So they can't, I've spoken to, some of you have heard a call or two that I had with big rabbis. And they started the conversation, the 30-minute conversation, as though they were going to teach me something, just like these rabbis thought they were going to teach baby Jesus or teenage Jesus or almost teenage, preteen Jesus something. And then I started talking and they got real quiet and they had to admit, you got this, man. Well, I don't know where you got it. But I'm here now. Listen, I need to be listening to you. I've heard that from professional linguists who were professional Arabic speakers, teachers of Arabic. They said, I've never seen anybody who's had meanings for all of the Arabic letters and in the way and the structure and the importance the way you do. So I have to be, even we know Salim Mu'min. He's top of the chain when it comes to teaching Arabic to the associates of Imam Muhammad. He's over there in Africa now, right? Mali and Mali Institute. He's teaching these people back their language. He said that what Instructor Bilal has, don't ask me about it. All I know is that I tried to find holes in it and I couldn't find any. I'm quoting him. He said, therefore, I have to learn it from him. I can't teach that to you. You got to go to him for that. And I have to go to him myself. This is what he said about this Nunetics. And folks are still dragging their feet. What do you want? Imam Muhammad to come back from the dead and tell you my boys got it? He can go around the world and teach this to anybody? Is that what you're waiting on? I'm not talking to y'all that have tuned in. I'm talking to those who go, he ain't got nothing. Those people. You talk to them. I ain't got time to be listening to that. He talked too long, first of all. I ain't got time. Oh, what do you have time for? You're at home. It's the perfect time. It's the reset period. Man, oh man, let me continue and conclude. So again, that moment in the temple, and remember Imam Muhammad said temple means temporary. See, they were temporary leaders, temporary authorities. But that was the moment when their master teacher appeared in the form of 12-year-old Jesus. 12 in the scripture just means cosmic. Doesn't mean an actual age of a boy. It only means that this knowledge body was able to tap into universal principles because the 12 represents the 12 signs in the zodiac. You know, there was a cereal once called the Trix. You remember that? Trix. I think it's still out. And it had a cartoon rabbit as its spokesperson. And their tagline was, tricks are for kids. They used to snatch it from him when they would see him with it. They would say, tricks are for kids. He would disguise himself, as a kid or as somebody who wanted to eat that cereal, right? And they'd find out it was the rabbit and they would snatch it from him and say, tricks are for kids. Symbolism. See, that was an undercover way of saying that the rabbit, aka rabbi, had been feeding tricks, meaning trick knowledge, if we're going to use the language of Mr. W.D. Farad, that the rabbis had been feeding tricks to the infantile-minded public. Means the same thing that Mr. Farad said concerning Yaqub's penchant for teaching tricknology to the so-called grafted European. We don't accept all of that language. I'm just presenting it to you so you'll be able to follow my logic. And by the way, the killing off of the unwanted populations of so-called black children in that Yaqub myth, just as a note, a process note for you in this day and time of COVID-19 and this whole vaccination spree that they're trying to popularize, condition you for. In that Yaqub myth, the killing off of those unwanted future populations was done through vaccinations or inoculations. Yeah, in the myth, it says that Yaqub instructed his nurses to stick needles into the brains of newborn babies and tell their mothers it was an angel child. They died. It was an angel child. See, but because we don't understand that sophisticated level of symbolism that Mr. Farad was in touch with, because he was from the land of symbolism, ancient ancient India, the land of Brahma, Rama, Vishnu, Krishna. He was from that land. He knew these symbols. He knew what the sticking needles into the brains of newborns meant. He knew what that meant. It's the same thing in Christian symbolism that's told through the mythology of Jesus on the cross, having the crown of thorns pressed into his cranium. It's the same story. In Yaqub's myth, he had it done through the nurses. In the history of Christianity, as it was being formed by this Jewish cabal that I've been discussing with you, it wasn't done through the nurses, it was done through the gnosis. Gnosis. Look that up. It was done through the Gnostic method or methodology. Don't have time to go into the details of that during this call. But the point is that Yaqub told his nurses to stick needles, same kind of needles they're talking about inoculating you with the vaccines of Mr. Bill Gates, the non-medical person who's advising that the entire planet be given a medical procedure called vaccinations. Explain that. He said, I will not rest. You see his language? Rest. I will not rest. You think they're not choosing these words carefully? I will not rest until the entire population of planet Earth has received a vaccine. You don't understand their scheme. They create the problem so that they can come behind it with a solution that benefits their scheme. You know, sticking needles into the brains of newborn babies. The brain is where the cranium is. And the cranium houses get this, the corona. Did you know that your cranium has a corona of energy? The corona of your cranium's energy is tied into the energy of your pineal organ that we've been discussing. That is responsible for graduating your intellect up to its intuitive processes. Supra-intuitive processes. It's those processes that link you up once again with cosmic consciousness. Imam Muhammad said we are to grow as human beings into what he called cosmic man. That goes beyond even planet Earth. Those are Imam Muhammad's words, in case you haven't heard them. I heard it with my own ears at Masjid Malcolm Shabazz in about 1985, 86 or so. I believe I saw it on YouTube. And if I find it, you got it. Now, when the mother is in the process of delivering, the first presence of the top of the head is called crowning. Corona, get it? Crowning. So if the emphasis in their language scheme right now is on corona, if it's on the crown, either one of two things or maybe both things simultaneously are happening as we speak. Number one, a crown of thorns is being crushed into the skull to annihilate the energies that the pineal gland has been created to present. That's the first thing. The second thing, for those who are not victimized by the crowning of the thorns, the crowning also refers to the introduction of a new life, a baby. That's how they know it's coming. She's crowning. They can see the top of that head, beneath which lies the pineal. That's why they say don't mess with the top of his head. Don't push it. That's his soft spot. See, when it's born, it's a soft spot. You have to protect that crown. And I say that what we're seeing effectuated in the world as we speak, called the reset, the global reset, is actually a depiction of both pictures. One, there is the crowning of the thorns. You know what the thorn means? Let's go back to W.D. He said thorns represent a particular people whose modus operandi is greed. He said the thorn is the only plant that snatches oxygen out of the air, key word, oxygen out of the air, to feed itself, because it is in a situation, an environmental situation, where it doesn't want anything around it growing except for it. And if you go try to interrupt it, it'll prick you. And you'll bleed. Blood is a symbol of the social nature. You go try to mess with that scheme, you'll bleed. It'll cause damage to your social nature. So that's the first thing. That's the thorn. It represents greed. I want to be the only thing wealthy in the desert. Everything else can dry up and die. Now you're talking to Bill Gates and company, and he's just a front man for some folks whose names you'll never know, who are much wealthier than him. Now, see, that's the other thing. Don't just be believing what they said because they said it. He's a multi-billionaire. He bought an island. He did that. Listen, some of these people are on a payroll just like you. And if they don't do what they're told to do, they get off of the payroll just like you. And Imam Muhammad said a paycheck is there to check your pay. Those people, they get paychecks, trust me. The heads of corporations, the big bankers, all of them are on payrolls. And again, if they don't do what the super authorities over them, the wizards behind the curtain, the ones you'll never see, if they don't do that job, then they're taken off the payroll and you hardly hear from them ever again. Maybe until they die. So don't think these are the people. Don't trust the people who are stealing from you to tell you the truth about who they are. They're not going to tell you I'm the thief who stole from you and I live at such and such drive and this, that, I own these buildings and these automobiles. And I mean, everybody from whoever that is that created the Tesla and all, you think these people are super billionaires? They don't have to be billionaires. They only have to be super protected by this private cabal. So that's the first crowning, the greedy gangsters in the world who you'll never see. The second manifestation of the crown is seen in the scenario, if you can follow me in this, of everybody suited up in surgical masks and gloves. That is the premier sign that a new baby is about to be born. You see how Allah just snatched their scheme out from under them and made it his scheme? See, I know y'all are scheming to steal these people's oxygen, to take these people's breath away. I know what y'all are scheming. But listen, I'm going to make your scheme reflect my plan. Allah says Satan schemes and Allah schemes, and Allah is the best of schemers. That's in the Quran. So while Satan is scheming, you should be able to read Allah's plan, wrapping around his plan, choking the life out of his plan. And that's why they're all skirmishing now, running into each other like the Three Stooges. This is why Trump is singing a different song. I think he realized that they were setting him up to be the fall guy, and that he would go down in history as the greatest idiot ever born into a position of authority. He saw that. I believe that. And now he's backtracking. He's moonwalking. He's saying, oh, well, let's look at alternative measures of curing and all. And we know, and everybody shouldn't have to get the vaccine. It should be their choice. And he's saying all kinds of things. And now his little cabal crew, Dr. Fauci and all of them, are starting to come against him. He's not a medical person. Well, what the hell you have Bill Gates in front of us for? He's a computer guy. He couldn't get the viruses out of his own computer. He's going to get the viruses out of you, stupid? Excuse my screaming. You know I'm not talking to any one of you. I'm talking past you. So listen. When Christ was supposedly being crucified on the cross, according to the New Testament Bible, the thing that sealed the deal of his sure death was the crown of thorns that was being crushed into his skull. Imam Muhammad talks about that so beautifully in the lecture called The Need for Leadership, July 4th, 1976. You can find that online on YouTube. Just Google W.D. Muhammad, The Need for Leadership. Man, that was an inspired lecture. All of his lectures are inspired, in my opinion. But that one really, really, really took the cake. So that crown that they put on Jesus's head is called the corona in the Latin language. That's just the Latin word for crown. And before his murder on the cross, he said to his crucifiers, I thirst. And it was at that point that they said, oh, you thirst? Huh? Okay, you're looking for some water? I tell you what, we're going to bring you what we want you to have to drink. And they brought him vinegar. Can you imagine? Vinegar and hyssop. And vinegar cuts the breath. You see in the connection to the coronavirus? Vinegar, put your nose up to vinegar and put some vinegar up to your nose and see what happens to your breath. It cuts your breath, your oxygen intake. And they also gave him an herb called the hyssop. Hyssop. Now let's talk about both of those. Vinegar in the Latin language is called aceta. A-C-E-T-A. That's the Latin word for vinegar. And vinegar is a preservative. That's what they use to preserve pickles and other things, right? This idea came out of ancient Egypt. They were the #1 society of scientists who understood the principle of preserving things. They did that even with the mummies, to the point where you can look at those mummies now, they still have skin on their bones. They have couches and other pieces of furniture that look just as good as what you're sitting in right now in your living room, with the only difference being that if you touch those things the wrong way, they're going to fall apart. They're going to fall into dust. Poof. So it's an illusion. That's what they were using vinegar for. It was a preservative. It preserves the form even when the functionality has failed. Now let's look at this. What is Jesus called in the New Testament? He's called the Word of God. So what does that logically connect to? The fact that they took the Word of God and fed it vinegar and hyssop. They fed the Word of God that you're sitting there listening to and dribbling over every Sunday in the church. And they preserved the form of the religion. But the functionality, what Christianity is supposed to be doing in your life, you've been robbed of that. They have made that mate in you. Mute. They've muted out the functionality in religion, to the point where you can call yourself Christian all day long and still do all of the things that the people who hate Christianity do. You fornicate and you rob people and lie and mother others and all. You talk all that stuff and then go to church on Sunday. And a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, have adopted that same principle. Talk all that stuff during the week. Hate people, hate Christians, hate Jews, they hate anybody that hasn't taken Shahada, and then hate those who took Shahada who are not in your camp as Sunnis or Shia or Ahmadi or whatever. So it's the hate that hate produced. It's called Islam. That's not Al-Islam. That's Islam. That's why it needs a reset. That's what's going on right now. That's why Allah shut the masjids down. Can't even go to Hajj. can't even go to Eid. See, the rabbi said, they don't rule us. We have our funerals and we press up against each other by the thousands, and I dare you, come say something about it. See, that's an independent-minded person in religion. They don't let the government tell them what to do. They have independent examinations of what the situation is, and then they draw the conclusion with their own information and their own knowledge based on their own set of personal and social circumstances. Then they say it is better if we cordon off or if we separate ourselves for this period of time. But they came to that conclusion, not the government. How are you going to let a government tell you not to press up against somebody, and every time you see them telling you about the problem, they're pressed up against each other with no masks, no gloves? What keeps them so safe? Where you feel unsafe wearing a mask or not wearing a mask outside in the air. Sometimes in your car by yourself with the windows rolled up, you're still wearing the mask, suffocating yourself, feeding your immune system the level of air, carbon monoxide, that is actually a poison to you. It's good for your plants, but it's a poison for you, the air that you're breathing out. You're breathing in oxygen, you're breathing out carbon dioxide, pardon me, not monoxide, that's the stuff that comes out your cars. Carbon dioxide. You're just, take the mask and you're just rebreathing your own poisons. Now, if you have to do that because you're in an environment that's toxic, that's different, that's intelligent. You don't want to breathe on other people. You don't use those masks to catch something. The doctors and the nurses use it so they won't breathe what they're emitting onto the surgical issue. They don't want to breathe that into an open body, into a bloodstream. So they're doing it to protect you, not to protect themselves from you. You better wise up. Let's conclude. So vinegar is a preservative. Too many Muslims are living in Islam that is just preserving ritualism. But there's no wisdom. There's no knowledge. There's no functionality that will allow for the establishment of a true Medina, a place of real deen. So that's an easy thing to set up, to shut down, to curtail. That's easy. Especially when you're depending on people who are from somewhere else and they feel threatened that if they say the wrong thing, they're going to be deported and that kind of thing. See, that's you carrying around a religion that is just form and ritualism with no real substance. You got the look, but you don't have what it takes to truly establish what Allah has suggested that we establish based on His Quran. Because what Allah has established as a social construct is portable. Remember Imam Muhammad saying that? My religion is portable. He said I could put it in a suitcase. He can just carry it around with me. I don't have to have no thobe. I don't have to have all of these trappings and sandals and all that. And I don't have to have all that. You women, you don't have to have no hijab or whatever that is. You don't have to have that. Your religion is portable. Stay decent, stay honorable in public, and stay decent and honorable in private, and you got your dean on the most part. So let's look at hyssop. We looked at vinegar, the preservative. The preserver of forms, but not function. Hyssop is an herb which reduces and maintains low blood pressure. This is all Imam Muhammad's wisdom, by the way. Hyssop, I repeat, is an herb which reduces blood pressure. And as you know, blood is a symbol of the social nature. And therefore, the lowering of blood pressure is symbolic of the lowering of social pressure. We would simply call it protest. So look at what these people have done. They've taken this idea behind the crucifixion of Christ, meaning the crucifixion of God's word in the world. For Muslims, that would be the Quran. That was crucified also. For Christians, it would be the Injil. That was crucified also. For the Jews, it would be the Torah. That was crucified also. Why? So that the people who are ruling will be able to regulate you and your behaviors. Once you find out that they have been scheming a scheme, plotting a plot, and planning a plan above your heads, that involves you giving your entire life to them. Working, as Michael said, working day and night. I'm so tired. Yeah, that's how they want the whole world under this scheme. Working day and night. While staying in love with them. By the time you get to retire at 65, whatever, 55, 60 or whatever, they say most people die after that because they feel like they don't have anything to live for. They've been working like that 8 hours a day or 16 hours or whatever, or double time, overtime. As Imam Muhammad used to say, shaving in their car, while they're on the work. She putting on her makeup. I've seen it time and time again on the highway. She trying to drive and look in the mirror, trying to apply her lipstick and her eyes and eyelashes and all the rouge and all that in the mirror on the way to work, because you're living for the people who have created you to be their abd and could care less whether you submit to God as his abd. They want you as their slave. So they know once you wake up to that you're going to become enraged. You know how many people are waking up to this scheme as we speak, that we're talking about the global reset and realizing that all of these things are not necessary that they've been doing? We've been here before. The numbers of people, even the ones who have died, are really, they say, just a bit higher than the average seasonal flu kills every year. Every year. And that they've been fabricating and puffing up the numbers. They're admitting this now. So as more and more people in this particular age that we're in, some call Aquarius, that just means the age of the time when water is being poured out. Water means truth. Water means moral principles. But water also means emotionalism. So once the people find out, they're going to become enraged. Even the doctors now saying, what's the reason for all of this? Why so many lies intertwined in all of this COVID information that you're feeding us? Why so many lies? But my uncle died from... No, not necessarily. If you went to test for it right now, you probably have it. They say in 85 to 90% of the people, it's dormant. It's just something. It's a seasonal flu. It's a little worse than a flu. But the fact that the doctors and administrators over hospitals have been told by Dr. Fauci that anybody who dies in the hospital, you have to put that they died from COVID, even if they were in a car crash. I've seen the paperwork. And they come into the hospital and they test for COVID and have it, even though it's not operative. You don't say they died from a car crash. You say they died from COVID, because every time a person dies from COVID, the pharmaceutical companies get $39,000. The hospitals, the doctor, they get 13 just to say you got it. If they have to put you on a ventilator, they get $39,000 $1,000 per patient. All right. So as you continue to wake up to that, you're going to become exceptionally angry. And that makes your blood pressure rise. The fact that they gave Jesus hyssop is saying that they're giving the followers of God's way 2 stimulants. One is an herb that preserves the outer form, so you can still be what you are, just be it at home now. Keep it home. Quarantine it. You can still be that. You can still make your salad and still have your Christmas tree if it's still there, because it'll be back by Christmas, by winter. They're going to reclaim and say it, and it's all over. It's even worse now because it's the flu season. Okay? Yeah. And when the people wake up, they're going to need something in the language that quells social pressure. It's all a part of the language scheme. Asceta gave the Christian world the word ascetic and asceticism. And asceticism is the separation, listen carefully, of one's self from social contact and involvement. Isn't that what they're asking you to do? World public, separate yourself, social distancing. They put tape lines on the floor in the supermarket. And people will look at you like you're trying to kill them if you stand a foot in front of that strip. Or if you come in without a mask. You look at them, you try to nod and smile, and they look at you like you're trying to kill me. See, that's what they want. That's why they give you those numbers every day in the news. 1,000 more people have died. If you open up these cities, you're going to be sorry, Mr. Trump or Mr. Governor. You'll be responsible because it's coming back. It's the invisible enemy. That's what they call it, the invisible enemy. You know what we say for invisible enemies? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Going about your business. And just continue to live intelligently. Do what intelligence calls for. So asceta is asceticism. The ascetics, they separate even from sex. Do you know they're saying now that the coronavirus, COVID-19, can be sexually transmitted? That's the latest. It can be sexually transmitted. It's passed down in the male sperm. So be careful now. Even when you're sleeping with your marriage mate, be careful. Don't get too close. If you can't see the scheme, you're blind. The ascetics don't want to have sex. They don't want to marry, nor do they want to bear children. The preservation of the rituals minus the wisdom behind the ritual is what they're after. Muslims, as I said, have been tricked by that very same scheme by the undercover social manipulators who infiltrated our deen approximately 1,000 years ago and substituted the Quran with hundreds of thousands of spurious hadiths. I'm going to leave you with that cliffhanger only because we're going to bring you some powerhouse information tonight in what I'm calling my Night of Power lecture. It begins at 9 p.m. If you're going to the masjid, we'll see you later. We pray for you. If you're not going to the masjid and you're going to be home, you get your reading in if you haven't done it. You get your salat in if you haven't done it. You kiss your babies and talk to your mate. If they're going to bed, okay, that's fine. If not, stay up and listen with me, sweetheart. But at 9 o'clock, I'm listening to Instructor Benjamin Bilal deliver words based on the surah called Al-Qadr. And he's going to be speaking on the intrinsic meanings in the words of that surah. And I don't want to miss it. That's how you talk to them. Say, sweetheart, I'll see you later on. I'll be to bed later. I'm going to stay up. Salat is better than sleep. As-salatu khayrun min naum. I'll see you when I see you, but I'm going to listen to Instructor Bilal. That's going to be on this same number that you called in on today. Let other people know who might not have been available in the daytime for these afternoon calls. Let them know I'm going to be on tonight. They might want to change into their pajamas before they start listening because I'm going to let the Spirit guide me.